Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Today we're beginning a new topic in Father Sparago's exhaustive explanation of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and it's the means of grace. And we're going to start by talking about the most important thing to us as Catholics, the holy sacrifice of the Mass. So you're going to really enjoy this one. You'll want to share it, and there's another reason you're going to want to share today's podcast with friends and family and everybody you know. This will be the second year in a row that for Lent, for my almsgiving during Lent, I give away free ebooks. So here's the deal. We know that it was just Ash Wednesday yesterday. Lent is a time of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. My almsgiving to my readers, to my listeners, to anybody that wants one, separate for what I might give to the church or give to charity or anything like that. I want to give you my work for free. Yes, I know that sounds crazy, but I did it last year, and hundreds of people took advantage of it, and I really enjoyed it. Each person who emails me at judson@judsoncarroll.com and tells me which of my books that they would like, I send them a free PDF of it. And it's just my way of giving back. You are the people who make it possible for me to make a living doing what I love, to do my work that God's given me. It's also a show of thanks to God for giving me this work and putting me in this time and place where I can do things like podcast and self-publish and send people ebooks and such. So go to, you can look up all my books on Amazon. You can go to judsoncarroll.com. I really think the easiest place, though, is southernappalachianherbs.blogspot.com. That's my blog for all my herbal work. Well, it's got this really convenient column on the right-hand side of the page where I can list all my books with a picture of the cover and give a description of it. So on there I've got, 11 herbal books right now, and books on religious-related herbal topics, like the Christian history of herbal medicine, the herbs and weeds of Father Johann Kunzel, such as that. Those are really great books. If you haven't read one with those yet, you really, get a copy of one of those. My confirmation, my conversion story, confirmation autobiography of faith, it's listed there. And, I do the daily gospel reflections. So the one for this term, this January through June, is listed. And then my cookbook's on there and my foraging guide's on there. So just pick one you like, free of charge. Email me, judson@judsoncarroll.com. Tell me the title, and I will, as quickly as possible, send you a PDF of that book. And I want to give away thousands this year. So share it with friends, family, and loved ones. It's not just one per household. If you got 2 or 3 people in your house and each one of you wants a book and you want to share them with each other, that's fine. That's fine. I really want to give back this year. So let's do that. Help me share it. Help me get the word out. And like I said, I'll get to you as quickly as possible. I may actually talk a little faster today than I normally do because my laptop is dying, and I'm trying to get this podcast done before it just totally quits on me. I spent all day yesterday backing up files. I ordered a new laptop a couple of days ago, but there was a problem with shipping, so I had to cancel that and order a new one. So I've actually got to do several podcasts today to get a few days caught up. So let's go ahead and jump in there. And we're going to start, of course, with radio replies. And the questioner has been asking the priest about doctrine. He's a modernist, probably a Marxist, or what we would call a liberal these days. And liberalism is completely incompatible. Modern liberalism, modernism, socialism, essentially, is entirely incompatible with Catholicism. Okay? You can only be a liberal Catholic in name only. And why is that? Well, to be a modern liberal, you have to endorse abortion. You have to support abortion. And the support of abortion means you are de facto excommunicated from the Catholic Church. When one of our liberal politicians, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, or whatever there, goes and receives the Eucharist in that state of mortal sin for promoting and supporting abortion, they actually become guilty of the body and blood of Christ, is what it says in the Bible. They become guilty of murdering Jesus. And any priest that encourages or enables that is going to have a lot to answer for. We need, these are mainly not ideologically liberal priests, though some are, and that's, incredibly sinful on its own right, but they're cowards. They're cowards that won't stand up to politicians. They don't want to create scandal. Well, they're actually facilitating this person going to hell and providing a bad example to the rest of the parishioners and probably leading people astray. And I really wouldn't want to be in that priest or bishop's shoes. Now, we do have some very liberal socialist priests. At its heart, these are secularist, atheist ideologies, and that really needs to be cleaned out of Catholicism. There is no place for modernist, secularist, atheistic, liberalist socialism in Catholicism. It's incompatible. Now, it's not a matter of an economic system, although socialism and communism are also condemned by Father Spirago himself in this exhaustive catechism of the Catholic Church, and by any rational thinking Catholic, because their ideology is based on theft and envy and greed, which are, mortal sins. Again, these are, really not good things. But any political ideology that embraces, endorses, supports abortion and gay marriage, there's another, example, and we could go on, is purely evil on its face, and it has no place in Catholicism. Now, so the person says, is it consciousness of weakness that makes the Catholic Church dread free inquiry? And the priest answer, she does not dread free inquiry into her truth and authority. At the same time, she knows the great capacity of the human mind for going astray. She dreads, therefore, prejudice, ignorance, and the fantastic conclusion of the illogical and half-educated. He continues, if it be a sin to doubt Catholic dogma, how can you weigh evidence for and against it? St. Paul tells us to prove all things. And the priest's answer, to admit that Christ is God and then to doubt an exact statement of his teaching is certainly a sin, for that implies either denial of his knowledge or of his veracity, truthfulness, in other words. But we do not need to doubt a thing before we can begin to study it. I do not doubt the fact that the earth moves around the sun, yet I am perfectly free to weigh all the evidence for or against that proposition. St. Paul believed in the dogma of the Trinity, yet he could not prove that dogma save by proving that God had revealed it, and it must be accepted on God's authority. And the man says, if a man changes from Protestantism to Catholicism, does he not do so by his own judgment? And the answer, of course, he must judge that Protestantism is false and Catholicism is true. But that judgment is preliminary to faith. Having made that judgment and acted upon it, he becomes a Catholic, and from that moment on he is guided by what he believes, not by his own human judgment or opinion, but what Christ has actually revealed as taught to him by the Catholic Church. And he says, what is your opinion of rationalism? And the answer, it is the name of a system accepted by illogical people who wish to imply by the self-chosen title that they are really guided by reason. And he says, has not rationalism made havoc of Christianity, reducing the Bible to a myth and quenching the fires of hell by humanitarian principles? Yes, I would say he is definitely a modern-day liberal. And they answer, it has not made havoc of Christianity. It is, however, making havoc of Protestantism. But Protestantism is not really Christianity. Now, there's a bold statement. Let's say that again. Protestantism is not really Christianity. The Catholic Church alone is the true representative of Christianity, and she is not affected by rationalism. The Bible is as authentic as ever, and humanitarianism has not affected the fires of hell, even as it had nothing to do with their creation. As has been well said, the only way to abolish hell is to abolish one's own by leading a good life and serving God. The man continues, is not rationalism on the increase, people becoming indifferent to your Christianity? And they answer, outside of the church, yes. The Protestant principle, do not be told by the Catholic Church what to think on religion, but be free to think for yourself, is proving fatal to Protestantism. And that is very true. As I've discussed many, many times, Protestantism is in decline worldwide, but especially in America. Men have simply asserted their freedom to think Protestantism itself, and indeed all religion, useless. Catholics who do not accept the principles of free thought are not affected to any great extent. If you do not fear rationalism, why do you forbid Catholics to read rationalistic writings? And the priest answer, we do not fear rationalism. We do fear lest some individual Catholics be taken in by its sophistries, thinking that because they themselves do not see the solution to difficulties proposed, that there is no solution. Rationalistic writings constitute a danger for shallow and untrained minds, and rather a waste of time for educated men. And finally he says, we rationalists can never become Catholics. And they answer, but rational men can do so. If you are not a Catholic, it is not sound reasoning that keeps you outside of the Catholic Church. Defective information, mere want of thought, prejudice, moral cowardice, heredity, environment, and 100 other factors may conspire to keep men outside of the Catholic Church. But sound reason never does. Sound reason is the greatest ally of the Catholic Church in the natural order. All right, and I am going to try to get through this one without editing at all. So if I stumble over a word, I'll try to repeat it more clearly because I don't know how long the computer is going to last. And I just can't use my phone for recording podcasts. I know some people do. I don't know if it's my phone or if it's me, but I'm far more comfortable speaking into a microphone and using a quality sound editing program than, just doing a phone call. It just doesn't work for me. So, having taken a sip of a beverage, I will now embark upon Father Sparago's explanation of the Mass, the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And he begins with the topic on sacrifice in general. That's where we have to start because the Mass is a bloodless sacrifice. It is a representation, a representation. Let's break that word down. Representation of the sacrifice of Christ in the crucifixion. Since the most important of all the means of grace, the Holy Mass, is a sacrifice, it is necessary first of all to speak of the sacrifice in general. The word to sacrifice means to offer something valuable to some person as a token of affection for or dependence on that person, or to surrender something that we prize for the sake of another. If a father gives all he has to his sons to enable them to pursue their studies, and himself lives in straitened or difficult circumstances, he is said to have made a great sacrifice for his children. When a soldier marches to battle for the defense of his country at the risk of his life and limb, he is said to sacrifice himself for his country. By a sacrifice to God is signified something given up to God out of love to him. The poor widow cast money into the treasury, the last 2 mites which she possessed. In doing so, she made a great sacrifice for God's sake. That's Mark 12:43. Tobias did the same. When in captivity, he distributed alms to his poorer fellow countrymen at peril of his own life, and buried the bodies of the slain. Tobit 1. Several reasons Martin Luther cut the book of Tobit from the Bible. One, he said that all works were evil. He said faith alone that was all that mattered. Charity didn't matter. In fact, charity was just as bad as anything else you could do. Sacrifices for another person, any good work, he said, had no merit at all. Well, we see in the book of Tobit that Tobias is rewarded for his sacrifices, his works of charity, his acts of charity. There's also the intercession of the archangel, I guess, was Raphael in that? Yes, Raphael. And it's a very Catholic book, even though it's a Jewish book of the Old Testament, and he had to cut it out of the Bible, or his followers, his Protestant followers, would have seen that his teachings were not in accord with the Bible, which he said was the sole authority on the faith. So really pretty amazing how blatant he was in his graft, his con artistry, I guess. I mean, he was an antichrist and a very bad man who has led millions of people astray. So, let's see, that was Tobit. The Jews made sacrifice when, after giving of the law, they brought gold, silver, precious stones, purple, etc. to Moses for the making of the tabernacle in Exodus guess it's Exodus 35. We are told in Holy Scripture that to keep the commandments, to depart from injustice, and to do mercy is to offer sacrifice. Ecclesiasticus 35:24. And that's what we call the book of Sirach, and that's another one he cut from the Bible because he couldn't have that in there. The essential part of sacrifice is the surrender or renunciation of some object that we highly prize. Of old, if anyone desired to accentuate his surrender of the object he valued, he used to destroy it completely, thus rendering it impossible for him ever to be able to recover possession of it. The sacrifices offered by Cain, Abel, and Noah were of this nature. Abel slaughtered and burned the firstlings of his flock. His brother Cain offered the fruits of the earth as a gift to the Lord. Genesis 4:3-5. Noah, on leaving the ark, took some of the animals and offered them as holocaust upon the altar he had built. That's Genesis as well, and that's, I guess, 6:20. Hence, the word sacrifice signifies the voluntary surrender or the destruction of an object which we value, to give honor to God as our supreme Lord. It is no uncommon thing among men to present a valuable present to someone as a sign of respect or an act of homage. Subjects not unfrequently offer their best produce and their skill to the monarch. So we ought to give to God what we most value. And as in a state there are certain honors which it is the exclusive prerogative of the ruler to receive, so the offering of sacrifice is an act of homage which can be paid only to God. There are bloody and unbloody sacrifices. As may be seen from the sacrifices of Cain and Abel, the oblation offered in sacrifice varied according to the nature of the possessions of him who offered it. Either a victim, such as an ox, a lamb, a dove, was taken from the animal kingdom. This was a bloody sacrifice because the blood of victims was shed. Or an oblation was taken from the vegetable kingdom, some species of food, such as flour, fruit, or drink, wine, for instance. This was an unbloody sacrifice because it was without the shedding of blood. The animals used to be slaughtered, their blood poured on the altar, and their flesh either consumed entirely by fire or eaten in part by the priests and Levites. Once again, if you actually read the Bible, you know that Judaism and Christianity are not vegan religions, regardless of what you may have been taught in college. The fruits of the earth were either burned or eaten. Wine was poured out as a libation on or before the altar, and also we use wine. We're not teetotalers either. We're not whatever they call that, reformed, whatever. That's a Protestant thing, and mainly the reason they tried to outlaw alcohol was because they wanted to outlaw the mass, in a lot of cases. So anyway, the intention of sacrifice may be to give honor to God, to give him thanks, or to entreat favor, or to make propitiation. The offering of a sacrifice gives outward expression to the feelings of the heart. The man who has a due knowledge of God, who knows him to be the Almighty Creator, the wise and bountiful preserver and ruler of the world, will be penetrated with sentiments of respect, of gratitude, of confidence, and contrition. And since it belongs to the nature of man to manifest outwardly what he feels inwardly, he will evince these sentiments by the surrender, the renunciation, or destruction of some object that he values. These sentiments are equal to a sacrifice. Without them, it would be mere hypocrisy. Consequently, the sentiment of compunction is of itself sometimes designated a sacrifice. It means, when your conscience is condemning you for what you've done wrong. Sacrifices of praise used to be offered daily in the temple. Noah's sacrifice was a sacrifice of thanksgiving, while the sacrifices of Judas Maccabeus caused to be the sacrifices which Judas Maccabeus caused to be offered before going to battle were deprecatory sacrifices. Those offers for the warriors who fell in the fight were expiatory sacrifices. Another book Martin Luther had to cut from the Bible because, one, you're seeing these sacrifices, but two, because Judas Maccabeus, or in the books of Maccabees, the Maccabees emphasized prayers for the dead, expiatory sacrifices for the warriors who fell in battle. And of course, Martin Luther didn't believe in prayers for the dead. He didn't believe in purgatory or anything like that. And he had changed the words of the Bible to fit his doctrine. The custom of offering sacrifices has existed in all times and among all nations of the world. Sacrifices have been customary from time immemorial. They were offered by Cain and Abel, the children of the first man and the first woman. They are found among the Jews and Gentiles. The Jewish high priest offered an oblation morning and evening in the name of the people. First he burned incense upon the altar, and he offered an unbloody sacrifice consisting of flour, oil, and frankincense. Leviticus 6:14. And finally a sacrifice in which the shedding of blood, the victim being a lamb of 1 year old, without blemish, together with an oblation of food and drink. Exodus 29:38. On the Sabbath day, 2 lambs a year old, together with the bread and wine, were immolated or burned in the addition of the daily oblation. Numbers 28:9. Special sacrifices were also appointed for certain feasts. The heathen nations also offered sacrifices, but their ideas on the subject were perverted, for they offered human sacrifices, and not to the true God, but to idols. Hence St. Paul says, "The things which the heathen sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to God." 1 Corinthians 10:20. We read in Holy Scripture that the king of Moab took his oldest son and offered him for a burnt offering upon the wall in order to obtain help against the Israelites. That's 4 Kings 3:27. The Phoenicians and other Asiatic people used to yearly immolate young children to their god Moloch, the brazen statue of the deity being made red hot and the children cast into its arms. The custom of offering sacrifices formerly prevailed to a great extent in Mexico. Very true. Very true. Yeah, a lot of human sacrifice among the native tribes of the Americas, a lot of cannibalism. We need to remember this when people attack Catholicism for, conquering the native religions and taking away a lot of their religions were really evil. Really evil. Some aspects of it were good. God makes every person. He puts the truth in everybody's heart. But they were very, very led astray by demons. And, that is the truth. You want to know what happened to the Mayans? Well, the Aztecs mostly ate them, kept them in cages, fattened them up, and ate them. Okay? Columbus and the other explorers that usually brought priests with them and taught Christianity, Catholicism specifically, to the native tribes of the Americas, brought them peace and prosperity and happiness and health. Yes, they were mistreated by the governments that those people represented, but not by the church. The church was really, really good to them. You may have remembered there was this big scandal in Canada, probably 2 years ago now, where they said all these unmarked graves were being found at all these schools and orphanages where Catholics were caring for the children of native tribes, and people went crazy. The church is so bad, Catholicism so evil, they just killed these children. Been totally disproven. Totally disproven. Those graves don't exist. Those graves, that was a lie that was published in the press. That part hasn't really gotten out. What got out was the lie, and a lot of churches were vandalized and priests attacked, and we really do need to know and be proud of our Catholic history, and when we've made mistakes, acknowledge them, but don't let people just condemn. I mean, we should celebrate Columbus Day. What's been taught in our schools is horrible, and it's false as well. It's lies. It's false. So anyway, yes, the custom of offering human sacrifice formerly prevailed to a great extent in Mexico. It is said that a number of victims slaughtered in a year amounted to no less than 20,000 people. 20,000 people killed in human sacrifices in Mexico every year. That was in a time when the population of Mexico was not that big either. So anyway, human sacrifices are not yet entirely abolished. They are still customary among savages, notably among some African and Indian tribes. Remember, this was written in the 1890s. I don't know that it's still true, but still be pretty violent. Anyway, how sad is the condition of man without the Christian faith? The chief motives which urge mankind to offer sacrifice are the consciousness of sin and the desire for reconciliation with God, and because God often required or sanctioned the sacrifice. The consciousness of sin was a powerful incentive to man to offer sacrifice. St. Paul says, "In them there is made a commemoration." Sorry, a little congested here today. "In them there is made a commemoration of sins every year." Let me get a sip of this drink again. And that's Hebrews 10:3. And again, without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. Hebrews 9:22. God not unfrequently shows his approbation of sacrifice. He testified his acceptance of Abel's offering in Genesis 4:4, and of Noah's in Genesis 8:21, of the holocaust offered by the prophet Elias. Holocaust means sacrifice, essentially, which was consumed by fire from heaven. 3 Kings 18:38. On many occasions, God required a sacrifice of that of as of that of Isaac. Genesis 12. He gave minute directions concerning the sacrificial offerings to the Jews by Moses' lips in Leviticus, several passages there. The knowledge that God approved of and even demanded sacrifices from man was a potent motive in inducing him to offer them. The sacrifices of the Jewish nations, more particularly that of the paschal lamb and the victim of expiation, were typical of the great sacrifice that the Redeemer was to offer on Mount Calvary. So a type of, a foreshadowing of. In the Old Testament, everywhere, there is shedding of blood. This was typical of the blood of Christ, whereby we are purified. On the great day of atonement, one of the ceremonies consisted in this. The high priest laid both his hands upon the head of one of the goats, which would be offered up for the people, confessing at the same time the iniquities of the children of Israel, and praying that they might light upon the head of the animal. Thereupon the goat was turned out into the desert. To express symbolically that the sins of the people were taken away out of God's sight. That's where we get the term scapegoat. Since the Jewish sacrifices were but a foreshadowing of our Lord's expiatory sacrifice, they ceased after this was offered, as had been foretold by the prophets, including Daniel and Hosea, Daniel 9:27 and Hosea 3:4. Nor were the sacrifices of the heathen anything more or less than seeking after the true sacrifice of atonement. The victims were without blemish, a pure and spotless oblation. Moreover, everywhere the persuasion seemed to prevail that it is impossible that with the blood of oxen and goats sin should be taken away. Hebrews 10:4. Or that the deity should be propitiated by any other similar victim. A victim of infinite value was needed to reconcile God with man. And we'll stop there. And next week we'll talk about the sacrifice of Christ upon the cross. We're going to get into we're getting really deep into the sacrificial meaning. It's not symbology. It's real in the Eucharist. It's a representation. And hopefully this will also give you a lot more insight into the book of Revelations or the Apocalypse, which is also a form of the Mass. You can read the Apocalypse of St. John in the context of, the end of the world and end times, or you can actually see it as really a symbology, a type of the Mass. So we'll get into that. Anyway, y'all, have a good one. Get a free book from me. Tell everybody you know to get a free book from me. I would like to give away thousands of free books this year. And say a prayer that my new laptop gets here on time so I can keep caught up with my writing and my podcasts. It's really hard to do when you only have a phone to work with, basically, right now. And I can't even open my word processing programs. I got different ones, and I'm writing 3 books at one time. I can't even open them on my laptop for some reason right now. And I tried to reboot it, and it almost didn't come back on. It took like 5 or 6 tries, so it's just like holding on by a thread right now. So I can't write. I will get some wood carving done. Don't forget, check out judsoncarrollwoodcraft.com if you want to see my carvings and maybe buy something from me. I always appreciate that. So y'all have a good one. Remember, this is the time of Lent, and I'll say one last thing. As kids, we're taught to give up, sugar or candy for Lent. A lot of adults might give up alcohol or cigars or what you might consider a bad habit. That's not really what Lent's all about. Now, if you have an issue, if you have an addiction, definitely try to give it up for Lent. Whether it's a food, drink, drugs, pornography, whatever it is, you do try to give it up. And God gives us special graces during Lent. And after 40 days, that habit, it may even be broken, but will at least be much strengthened against it. But that's not really what Lent's all about. Lent's a time of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. It's a time to draw closer to God. So really, it's a time to look at what in my life separates me from God. Is it a habit? Is it a sin? For me, I have a real issue with thinking about the past and worrying about the future. Well, that's actually very sinful. Jesus said, "Be anxious for nothing." So we can't worry about the future. And I've been reading Saint Faustina a lot lately, and she's just adamant that no one can change anything that happened in the past. So that's what I'm focusing on for Lent. Yes, I'm doing some dietary things. I'm fasting and a lot of different things like that, and making little sacrifices. But that's kid stuff, right? My resolution is not to think about the past or to worry about the future, but to try to live in the moment, relying on God, doing the best I can. If there's something like that in your life, I would strongly urge you to consider thinking not so much, I'm going to give up eating cookies for Lent, but what is this thing I need to work on that is separating me from God? And say a prayer about it. Pray on it a lot. Ask the help of your guardian angel and all the angels and saints, especially the Blessed Mother, as always. That I think is going to be far more efficacious, as Father Sparago would have said, than giving up soft drinks for Lent or something like that. That's just that's not really what it's all about. It can be good. It can be good, especially if you have a dependence, an addiction, whatever. Maybe you need to drop a few pounds. That's great too. But that's not really what it's all about. So just bear that in mind. I think, we tend to remember the way we were taught as kids, not ever really thinking that, that was almost really symbolic. That was making a little sacrifice. That was keeping you mindful of Lent. But that's not really what it's all about. So I'm just going to leave it there. Y'all have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time.